at the facilities/board meeting. I guess we're calling the meeting to order at 5:04. Do we have a party? Can you just?
Yeah, and I are both going to kind of collaborate.
I just want everyone to take a second and take a deep breath and acknowledge that this is a big moment. I've got the board sitting up here facing the screen because it's their first time hearing all of this tonight as well. So it's not meant as a look at our back type gesture. It's just a matter of we're going to then have a board discussion after the presentation. So I've just prepared a few things as I'm better reading than I am ad lib. Before we begin the presentation by Truex Collins, I'd like to address the ACSD community. Thank you for being here. We know that the development of the facilities master plan is important to you and appreciate your participation. We are also videotaping this meeting so those who are unable to attend have the opportunity to see and hear the presentation. Some of what I'm about to say was shared at the Ripon Town meeting on March 2nd by Amy McGlashan. I feel it is important and worth repeating here before we get started. We in ACSD are facing significant stresses in a number of areas, and we're not alone. We're experiencing significant declines in enrollment. In ACSD, we have lost 100 students over the last 2 years and project continued losses for the foreseeable future. On the whole, we're educating 10,000 fewer students in Vermont than we were 10 years ago, and 20,000 fewer than 20 years ago, and are projected to drop another 7,000 by 2026. Of our 7 elementary schools, 6 have fewer than 100 students. When 6th grade moves to MUMS in the fall of 2021, 5 of the 6 small schools will be under 75 students, 2 under 50. The huge discrepancy between our small and our one large school makes our enrollment and other challenges unique compared to other Vermont districts. While costs in other states are going down as enrollments decline, in Vermont the cost per pupil continues to rise. Education Week reported in 2019 that at close to $19,000, Vermont has the 4th highest per pupil expenditure in the nation, more than 50% higher than the national average. Yet Vermont is 25th in per capita income in the US and ranks 49th in economic outlook and 31st in economic performance. In other words, the states who spend more than we do, New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, all have much more robust economies and rosier economic projections than we do in Vermont. For many people in Vermont, the tax burden far exceeds what their incomes would have to bear in most other states. Vermont is one of the most expensive states to live in. As our enrollment continues to drop, our per pupil costs continue to rise, and those costs drive tax rates up. In ACSD, our per pupil expenditure hit $18,855 this year, a 7.76 increase, without changing any programs. Because of certain waivers, we were able to squeak under the threshold set by the state of $18,311. We barely missed the tax penalty for exceeding the state cap on per pupil spending this year. Next year, if we change nothing, we project that we will exceed the cap by around $800,000 and will thus face significant tax penalties. This will yield, for example, an almost $500 increase in taxes on a $300,000 home, and an additional $125 in taxes for a couple whose income is $80,000. In order to stay within the spending boundaries, we continually face the dilemma of cutting educational services, most likely in the form of having to reduce by more than 10 FTEs a year. Part of the challenge is driven by operating so many buildings, each of which has to be adequately staffed to provide a quality education. Our elementary buildings collectively have over $17 million worth of deferred maintenance. I've heard this board blamed for their condition. This board was not managing those buildings until 3 years ago. All of our elementary school boards chose to keep teachers and programming in place over needed upgrades and maintenance. These decisions were made with the best of intentions. However, the work cannot be put off forever, and it is time to figure out where we need to invest. Because we can't afford to fix them all, nor improve them, now is the perfect time to assess, plan, and invest in the buildings that will best support student learning objectives into the future. We want to be deliberate in the investigation and planning work to identify the best long-term solutions for our students and school community. The Facilities Master Plan represents an effort to look at our school district as a single system, as a way to address the challenges of declining enrollment, increased per pupil cost and building needs, and to maximize our limited resources to provide students with optimal learning environments and services. If we were ignoring all of this and not trying to come up with a long-term plan to mitigate the impact of these challenges, we would not be doing our job as a public board. So far, we've spoken a lot about cost and enrollment numbers and less about how students are doing and what we're doing to set every student up for success. We have a significant achievement gap in our district. For example, in the vast majority of our state assessments, there's a significant gap, in most cases 2 to 1 or higher, in proficiency between our not free and reduced lunch students and our free and reduced lunch students. This is particularly profound at the elementary level. We cannot begin to close that gap as we are currently structured. Keeping 6 schools open simply doesn't allow for us to begin to offer the breadth of quality programming and services for the small number of students in each of our elementary schools. It is increasingly difficult to budget for equity across schools and contexts, especially regarding the equitable distribution of behavior specialists, speech-language pathologists, and special educators. Using itinerant educators and specialists, particularly for special education and behavior intervention, poses huge service delivery challenges, not to mention recruitment and retention of quality staff. ACSD has a design team with educators from across the district that is working on a district-wide approach to social and emotional learning. Their aim is to develop a unified and coordinated system of services focused on the success of all students, which we see as critical to support our mission of IB for all. In order to support the needs of all students, these systems must leverage best practice, high levels of coordination and collaboration, and staffing models that provide a framework that focuses expertise and support where it is needed. Last year alone, we saw a 10% increase in the number of students identified as eligible for special education, while also seeing a decrease in our overall population. In other words, not only is operating 6 schools with fewer than 100 students no longer sustainable, it isn't meeting the needs of all of our kids and isn't the model we need in order to truly make up this achievement gap and achieve our mission of IB for all. What we hope and believe is that what we will be able to do will far outweigh what we will be giving up. We aim to align our investment in facilities with the ACSD board's vision for equity of access, so all students can become principled, knowledgeable, and caring citizens. The ACSD's board's vision is to provide for all of our students the learning environments and resources they need to succeed. In addition, we aim to provide optimum classroom sizes that exposes and engages our students with the range of diversity that make up our district, inviting and healthy learning spaces, and a broad selection of opportunities during the school day and after. In June of 2016, we began as a district to look at grade configuration because questions arose from our educators about where 6th grade should reside in our IB schools. The grade configuration study included a superintendent listening tour, 2 surveys, and 3 regional community forums. Ultimately, it was decided that the right thing to do was to move the 6th grade, but that the timing was to be decided later as we had just unified governance and wanted to have the move coincide with the beginning of a comprehensive look at facilities district-wide. In July of 2017, we conducted an initial facility conditions assessment. During the 17-18 school year, we developed the Facilities Master Plan process, and in June of 2018 formed the Facility Master Plan Steering Committee, made up of local community members, parents, teachers, and administrators. This group was integral in creating and conducting 3 community dialogues, putting together a community survey, and filtering through the many, many emails collected. We reviewed initial community data and began to draft recommendations. With the help of a moderator consultant, we conducted 3 community dialogue meetings focused on potential school configurations. We collected community feedback, and in September of 2019, the board felt that a smaller group would be better able to handle the workload and simplify working with the consultant to conduct the elementary school study, so the facilities committee was formed. We extended the initial timeline and hired Truex Cullens, an architecture firm that specializes in school plans, to conduct an elementary school study looking at the actual work that would need to be done to our schools to bring them up to code, their capacity and usage, and how well they support our academic programming, in addition to their deficiencies and advantages in regards to developing into larger schools. As a whole board, we developed guiding principles to frame this work and took action to move the 6th grade to MUMS by the fall of 2021. This fall, we extended the timeline again to allow for further community engagement, beginning with community meetings at each of our elementary schools. We hosted a community presentation on January 27th to communicate the findings of the elementary school study. Since then, we've been assisting Truex in developing configuration options. It brings us to today. Before David takes over, I'd like to frame what you're about to see and hear in the context of where we are in creating the consolidation proposals. If the finished plan is a 3-legged stool, each leg represents data from a different analysis: facilities, operations, and education. Tonight you are seeing the stool with only one leg. The plans are from a facilities standpoint. David will speak more to this, but I mention it as a reminder of where we are in time, and that there is still much work to be done as we analyze options from an operational and educational standpoint. In the coming weeks, we're planning on creating a comprehensive survey for all residents to weigh in on what is important to them while considering consolidation. In addition, we'll be hosting a community forum, which we're in the process of developing. The board is seeing this presentation on the consolidation scenarios for the first time tonight. After David's presentation, we will have a board discussion. Following that, there will be some time for clarifying questions from the community. I ask that these be questions related to the work that is being presented tonight. If you have other questions and/or things you would like us to consider moving forward, please either send me an email or write down your questions and comments and leave them in the box, which will be provided over here. Without further ado,
We've got index cards, right?
David, index cards in the box.
Those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for coming. My name is Dave Epstein. I am an architect with Truex Cullens. As Victoria said, my specialty is K-12 schools. With me is Lynn Wood, who's our project manager for the project. So we've been, as Victoria said, we've been working with the facilities committee to develop some options. And what I want to do is take you through the process, starting with the guiding principles and the model program, and to show you why so we can sort of, you can hear the story of how we develop these options. I don't want to just like airdrop them down and without explaining what the thinking behind them was. So this is and I apologize, I hope nobody gets a crick in their neck. I said to Bruce, I'm tall, but I'm not that tall. So that line, that blue vertical line is where we are right now. The red dot there, March 10th, we're presenting first time the configuration options. So there's been a lot of work before, there's a lot of work to come. The next step, as Victoria said, is going to be to analyze some of the operational impacts of each study, and also to analyze and assess, report out on the educational impacts of each option, unless of course the board says, you know what, get rid of option 1, we like, look, just focus on 2 and 3, forget about 4. So that's part of this, is we don't want to have to analyze every single option unless the board wants us to. So if the board, if there's some tonight that you look at and say, you know what, it's not even worth looking at, then that's good too. And this is a chance, we didn't want to fully bake these plans and then, come and say, here it is, it's a fait accompli. So this is an opportunity to show you what's happening in real time, get feedback, and so that we can tweak and modify and move forward with plans that make sense. So when did we do the guiding principles? Was that in
August.
August?
Last summer, yeah.
Yeah. So we did a visioning process with the board, and we came up with these guiding principles. And for people who were at the last facilities committee meeting or public presentation, I guess it was in January, some of this is going to be a little bit of a rehash, but I wanted to just walk you through the process because these are fundamental to some of the thinking behind developing the options. So some of them, the first one, creating a safe and secure environment, promoting a sense of community, kind of nothing surprising there. I've highlighted the words that are really critical. So the next one, equitable. So that was really important, that every kid in the district should have an equitable opportunity for both social and emotional development, but athletic and co-curricular opportunities as well. And then the third bullet is really what has become a driver in this study, is that the building should be of a sufficient size and adequate resources, and you'll see spaces to support full-time staffing of both academic and support positions. So that one is that's like putting your car into gear. And when we saw that one, we were like, okay, we now have some direction about where this thing is going. So what does that mean? So to have a school of a sufficient size to have full-time staffing of both academic and support positions is essentially a 2-section per grade school. So that means about 275, 290 kids. So 2 kindergartens, 2 first grades, 2 second grades, 2 third grades. That allows a full-time librarian. That allows full-time nurse, full-time art teachers, full-time music teachers who are there at the school all week long. You don't have to get sick on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday anymore. It also helps provide the second one, the student access to this full range. It means you can have a more robust programs with the adoption of the IB program, the PYP, which is Principal Years Program. Foreign language is a required class at the elementary level. So now you can have a full-time foreign language teacher in your school. So these weren't my ideas. This is what the board's vision. It also doesn't rely on multi-age classrooms. You could decide to do multi-age classrooms, but you're not relying on them. So some of the other things included connection to nature and sustainability, which we think we can achieve that in any of the options. That wasn't really like a driver in this. This is the hypothetical 2-section per grade school, what it looks like. It's about 45,000 square feet, which is a little more than double most of the schools in the district, the existing schools. People who were at the last presentation may remember that we did this whole heat map where we compared it to a 1-section per grade model school, like a sort of ideal 1-section per grade. And the reason why we did that was we wanted to show how the schools measured up to the hypothetical well-equipped school. So we wanted to show that, and this is true, that like almost most of the elementary schools, they don't have music rooms, they don't have art rooms. They certainly don't have foreign language rooms. Many of them don't have conference rooms. They're really lacking, and this is not uncommon with schools built from that era, that they don't have some of these things. But if you were to build a 21st century school, the ideal school, there are many things that the existing schools don't have. Some of the schools measure up a little better, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So now we're talking about a 2-section per grade model, because this is what the guiding principles are really driving towards. So that's what this slide is about. This is some of the things that you might find, and you'll see what we added in. I can't point at it and I can't aim at it here, but under category 4, we added a cafeteria. In category 3, we added a makerspace in a foreign language classroom. There's an art room and a music storage room. And what you find is, if you try to provide all these spaces at a 1-section per grade elementary school, your square foot per student goes through the roof, because you're providing all these spaces for half the number of kids. And interestingly, although there is no school construction aid right now, when there was, the way it was based was on square foot per student basis. So they'd give you X number of, they'd take the number of your students, they would take a square foot per student allocation, and they'd multiply it by dollars per square foot. So if you tried to build a 1-section per grade school, you would, instead of the 30% that they used to pay, you'd get far less, because your cost, your square foot per student is so much lower. There is no state aid for school construction right now, so it's a moot point, but if it should ever come back in the same form, an optimized school like I'm describing is going to give you a much higher reimbursement rate. So this, as Victoria was saying, this is, if you take the 6th graders out, this is the current enrollment. Weybridge and Ripton are under 50. Bridgeport is 57, Cornwall 69, Salisbury 72, Shoreham 81, Maryhogan is 385. So that's today. If you moved all the 6th graders to the middle school, that's what the populations are in the schools. And as Victoria mentioned, we're using this stool analogy to talk about what are the 3 components that create this reorganization plan. Today we're talking about facilities. At the next meeting in April, we'll be talking on the impact on operations and education. And you'll see some of the criteria for analysis that we're playing with right now. Today we're going to talk about, well, we did talk about in January building condition, but some of the issues in terms of suitability of the design, site size and grade, utilities, location. We're not really going to get into cost of redeveloping these sites yet. We do have the costs for the deferred maintenance piece, which we'll review very briefly. Under education, you'll see the bullets there are really about the guiding principles. So what we've done is we've taken the guiding principles, and because the board has identified those as being the most important things that we should be looking at as we look at this new vision for the district, those should also be the criteria by which we evaluate these new schemes. So access to full range of program and co-curricular offerings, equity, social opportunities, socioeconomic diversity, and addressing diverse learning styles. Now, there may be more criteria. I'm not saying these are the only ones, and some of these may drop out. Under operations, the district is going to be looking at things like staffing, impact on staffing, impact on cost of building operation and maintenance, and busing. And to get ready for that, this is pretty cool. This is a map. We found a consultant who could map every single household in the district and where they live and what school they go to. So this is the sort of habitation pattern in the district related to people with kids who go to school. So and I'll see if I can get this right. I think the triangles are elementary school, and what are the circles? Circles are high school, and the triangles are middle school. The white triangles are middle school. So kids are coming from all over to go, traveling the full length of the district at middle school and high school ages to get to the middle school and high school. But what we'll be able to use this is to really understand at the elementary level what some of the busing, like where are people coming from and what are some of the busing routes. Some people in the southwestern corner of Shoreham, for example, how long will it take them to get somewhere? We haven't analyzed that yet, but it's a great piece of information that we're going to use moving forward. So I'm just going to run briefly through the buildings very quickly, and just to remind people of what some of the important characteristics are relative to this discussion. So Bridgeport was built in '55. It was added to in '87. Really hasn't been any major projects there since then, as far as I know. In terms of the redevelopment potential, the good news is it has a very large site. It's pretty flat. It's got good access to 22A. There's a mound system on the site, so it's the drainage, its ability to add, a lot more kids. We don't know, a lot more people. It does have capacity. We don't know what the wastewater design capacity, but we know that it's permitted for the current building, which has a capacity of about 145. I think there's like 72 kids in there now, so it's like half capacity. So if we were to add more kids there, we could. You could also, there's plenty of room on that space to add. It does have municipal water service, which is good, but it does have on-site septic, as I mentioned, the mound system, which is always a sign that the soils don't perk great. Cornwall, or Bigham, is a much smaller building, much smaller site, gravel parking lot. It has a very, how many people have been to Cornwall? So most people know the building. It's a pretty funky floor plan. You can't get that from here, there, I can't point, but there's two sides of the building, and never the twain shall meet. So it's a challenging plan. I mean, nobody would ever design a building like this from scratch today. I don't know why they did it when they did it, but it's. I have other adjectives I'd use, but I don't use those here for it. The fact that it's a smaller site, it's a smaller building, and it has this funky floor plan, kind of put it for us, and this is strictly from a facility standpoint, like, in a certain column, and not in the like, wow, this is a great building column. We should develop this. The site is, like I said, it's not huge. We don't know about the stormwater permit. There's a lot of things we don't know. It has an aging septic mound. All these things can be discovered. But I think it's the building and the site size that really gave us pause. Mary Hogan is a real hodgepodge.
You mentioned capacity and current occupancy. Could you just do that for Cornwall, just so I can have it down further?
Sure. Yeah, I'll get to that. I'll definitely get to that, because the capacity, there's different capacities, right? There's wastewater capacity is one issue. So here on this, the wastewater capacity is 203. That's pretty good. There's capacity of this for students, which we do by we analyze the classrooms and we divide it by square foot per student, and we have that calculated. So I don't know exactly what capacity you're looking for, but
it's students.
Students, yeah, we'll get to that for all the schools. Mary Hogan obviously is much bigger site. It's got the central location. The site's quite large. There is stormwater infrastructure in place. It's wastewater permit, at least, is for a lot of people. So that one, you know, in all these scenarios, Mary Hogan, you know, spoiler alert, Mary Hogan plays a role because it's got so many kids. It's not likely to be one of the schools that would be repurposed. Ripton is much smaller. It's currently, so when you see occupants up here on this slide, occupants just means like about how many people are in the building using it, includes students and staff. So the site is large, adequate well capacity. You know, the issue is two things. One is the remoteness of it to any other, you know, if you look at those population map I showed you, it's pretty far from a lot of people. The building is very small. It doesn't have a lot of capacity as it exists now. And you can see the wastewater permit is quite low. So you'd have to go through it'd have to be examined. Some sites have great perking soils that percolate well. It's not a problem. You just add to the septic system. Other times it can be a real showstopper. So Salisbury is probably the best conditioned school in the district. It's the newest, so it's not a surprise. It's got pretty big classrooms, like lots of natural light. The site is quite large, close to Route 7. It's got, you can see its wastewater permit. It's adequate for more people there. So that it was definitely, you know, that I remember I mentioned Cornwall went in one column in terms of Salisbury went in another column of like, all right, this is a real asset to the district that could be leveraged. Shoreham is old with it had a couple additions, a new roof in 2001, a couple of small additions. One of the things about Shoreham, which was really troubling to us, and like I said, this is no emotion here, like we're just coming at it objectively as architects and who do schools a lot, is there are 3 buried classrooms. I don't know if you ever can see that in the middle of the space, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, with no access to natural light. And you just don't do that. Like, that's not good for kids, it's not good for teachers. The other thing about this school is, and I can't point, but if you, to the left of the building, it drops down a super steep incline, and up the page, it drops down a super steep incline. So it makes adding to it challenging, unless you're looking at 2-story additions and all that. Plus the fact that it's in the corner of the district. So for those reasons, we thought, you know, is Shoreham really the right one of the horses we want to ride here moving forward? Probably not. Weybridge is a pretty small school. It has a big site. It's not in bad shape. Once again, the wastewater permit and the actual capacity, when we look at that, are pretty low. So, and its sort of access and remoteness was really not, and there's a very small number of kids there. So this was not one we were thinking was going to be part of the a reorg scheme. So just to reiterate what Victoria was saying, you know, there's about $17 million of deferred maintenance at these schools, and you know, and obviously you can see the bigger the schools, the more work there is. Although Salisbury, you can see, is equally as big as, bigger than Bingham, similar size to Bridgeport, with far less work. So it's a little bit of shape. So at this point, any questions from the board? I think at this point I can only ask questions from the board. I apologize to people in the audience.
I have a question. You mentioned the two-section school would
Yeah.
be most cost effective. How about a three-section school? I mean, does it go up by scale?
Yeah, I mean, there are always economies of scale. I think 2 sections per grade was sort of a minimum size that would give you that full-time staffing. I don't know. I don't know whether 3 sections per grade is less optimal or more optimal. It's a good question. Because would you get into like, you need 1.5 nurse, or you know what I mean? Like you need 1.5 FTEs, and now you're splitting people between. It's a good question. Any other questions from the board? Okay, let's keep going. So, how many options? There's 5 options that we're going to talk about. The first 4 are options that would require a bond, and so you can see here listed. The first one is one new school. We're thinking in terms of 6 sections per grade for the district. You technically could probably squeeze them into 5, but we felt like to give the district flexibility in the future, that 6 made sense, and not have to like max out every single class size. So one new school is option 1A. Just build a brand new state-of-the-art facility, serve the whole district. There are plenty of elementary schools far bigger than 6 sections per grade. Not in Vermont, but like in Shelburne, K through 8 school, that's 4 sections per grade. That's at 850, 100 kids in my kids' school when they were growing up there. I mean, it's not an absurd. This would be 755 students in one building. So I just want to say it's not an absurd number of kids in one place, like in a school. It's, in other states you'd see it all the time. There are schools in this state that have, like I said, Shelburne has more kids than that. Plenty of, it's not inconceivable. The other one would be, we'll just add to Mary Hogan. Add 2 more sections to Mary Hogan and make that. The third is keep Mary Hogan and build a new school on the western side of the state and western side of the district, a 2 section per grade school. The second 2B would be Mary Hogan and make Salisbury a 2 section per grade school. And finally, option 3 is a no bond option, meaning you wouldn't have to. This is the funny thing. This was interesting to us. We didn't know this when we started this process, but like you could fit all the kids in 3 schools and not do any work, like not add anything to these schools. Like they have the capacity to do this. That's how much extra capacity there is in the district. So we created these diagrams just to make it a little clearer. So here's 1A, and this, to the gentleman who was asking about the capacities, Weybridge has a capacity of 99, Bridgeport of 145, and this will all be available right up on the web or somewhere, right, that people can have access to. And so in the gray is the gray circle is the actual enrollment if you take the 6th graders out, and in the smaller type here is what the capacity is. So Bridgeport's 145, Shoreham's 128, Cornwall's 124. As I was saying, Weybridge is a bit smaller at 99. Mary Hogan is 564. So to reiterate, what we did was we counted up the classrooms. We took the square foot of each classroom, we divided it by square foot per student, and it would say, like in Salisbury, huge classrooms, it would say 28 kids or whatever, and then we said, no, the district limits class sizes to 22 for grades 1 through 5. Is it 20, Peter, for kindergarten? Or 18? 18 for kindergarten and 15 for preschool. So even if a school had a huge room that could hold 27 kids, we calculated capacity using the limits set by the district. Ripon has a capacity of 84, Salisbury 152, and Cornwall 124. So that's 1A in graphic form. And you can see here, this is if you just added to Mary Hogan. So Mary Hogan's about 71,000 square feet. You'd have to pretty much double its size to make this larger school. So this is 2A. This is building a new facility in the western part of the district. And that's about 47,000 square feet. Remember I was saying 2 sections per grade is about 45,000. And you'd still have to add to Mary Hogan. Now, and the reason why is that because equity was an important guiding principle, if we're building a state-of-the-art facility, and state-of-the-art sounds kind of corny, like a good school, right? If we're building a good school that has a music room and an art room and a maker space and foreign language and is properly equipped, we better make sure Mary Hogan is also properly equipped. And so that means like putting a cafeteria on Mary Hogan and making sure it has the right number of classrooms and a couple of other spaces. So that's why there's an addition on Mary Hogan in this scenario. Similarly, in this 2 section per grade school, so then we said, well, Salisbury's in really good shape. Why would we abandon that school in 2A? Why not invest in that asset? So, because it would be a whole lot cheaper to invest in Salisbury than to build a new school. Right? You don't have land costs, and you only have to basically double the size of Salisbury as opposed to building a whole new school. So anyway, that's option 2B. So there's additions on both schools. And then option 3 is the no bond option. And you can see the capacity of Mary Hogan. So what we did here, let me just back up, just to make it like really Dick and Jane and very, very simple, is we just said, what if everybody from Ripon and Weybridge went to Mary Hogan, everybody from Cornwall went to Salisbury, and everybody from Shoreham went to Bridgeport, like just as a thought exercise, as opposed to like trying to imagine drawing, using that other map and drawing circles and saying this many households go here, just to make it super simple. And so you can see the capacity of Mary Hogan is 564. There'd only be 476 kids there. The capacity of Salisbury is 152. It'd have 141 kids. And Bridgeport would have 138. Its capacity is 145. So there's plenty of room in those schools. Now this means classes that are in the 20, low 20s and stuff like that, high teens. This is not the 12 kids per classroom model. It's more, the buildings are fuller for sure. And what's happened in these schools is like, I think I don't know if it's Bridgeport, but one of the schools, there was an extra classroom, so they just made it the staff room. Or they put like a specialist in a classroom because there's an extra classroom. So we have looked at those former classroom spaces and said, well, you probably could use those as classrooms, but it would put some pressure on specialists. But nonetheless, you can see, we even looked at a 4-school option, but we were like, why would you do a 4-school option? Because you're basically creating all these mini schools again, and guess what? As Victoria was saying, these numbers are going down. They're not going up. Like these schools would be at these capacities.
That's not true.
They're not. It's not at the elementary.
Well, I mean, I'm just going by the data that we have. I mean, yeah, I'm just going by the data that we've been given from the district and the statewide data. It could be different any given year at any given school, but we're talking about overall trends.
It's increased.
Folks, let's just we're going to try to get through this, and then we're going to provide an opportunity for comment based upon this
Right.
content. I understand, but it'll be helpful for us to get through all of it. Thank you.
So that sort of concludes the presentation. Now, just to reiterate where we are, today we're talking about, this is the beginning of this process of identifying the options, getting comment and feedback on them, and then continuing with the analysis of the selected options from both administration, education and operations. And then the other thing that we will be doing is putting together the costs for the different options where I was talking about them needing additions or needing renovations or whatever. There'll be costs for each options from each three of those, and we'll be able to present those to you. So at this point, I guess I'd like to open it up first to the board for discussion, questions, thoughts.
Turn on the lights a little bit. We don't need to see that.
Yeah. Good, thank you.
David,
Yeah.
could you speak a little bit as part of this process, how will we be informed of implementation challenges, timelines, impacts for any scenario? So construction or access to buildings and blah, blah, blah.
Well, we actually talked about that, and when we were looking at for school open, we were saying, well, you could, give you more swing space. So the concept when you're renovating a building is that you need swing space to move people out of those spaces while you renovate them. Not every renovation can happen in the summer. So in a scenario like if we go back one, here where you're doing work on both schools, typically what you do is you build the new additions first. That creates swing space. Then you move people out of areas to be renovated into the new space, and it kind of becomes a shell game where you move people out of areas to be renovated into the new space. We were talking in the planning group. We were saying, it's probably less disruption. Families would probably prefer their kids staying put in the school, even if there's construction happening on the site, than having to move to another school. So that was something we talked about, but that's generally how it works on these projects. If you're doing a project that is renovation and additions, you do the addition first.
The no bond option,
Yeah.
there's still going to be a cost associated with retrofitting those buildings to take in the additional children. So what are we talking about in terms of, you probably don't have a dollar amount
No.
set on this, but
So there's all the deferred maintenance, right? So
Right.
you have, it's really up to the district, really, how much they want to do. Whether this is the permanent solution or this is a phase one, moving towards a bonded option. There's a lot of factors at play, but it really depends on how much you want to invest in your buildings, right? There's probably $10 million just in deferred maintenance in those three buildings? And then, is it important to have an art room or a music room or a maker space or, from a strictly capacity standpoint, like just getting the kids in chairs in classrooms, there's room to do it without doing any additions. But it's really a question, what's the vision? Is the vision parking kids in chairs in old buildings, or is it a vision for, 21st century learning environment?
So you're saying there's a cost for deferred maintenance that fits into the no bond? But then if we wanted to retrofit those buildings or make them more state-of-the-art?
The cost of the fixing of the buildings, at least the ones that remain, it's out there. It's like, you can decide not to do any of it. Buildings, you know what I mean? Like people are occupying, people are using, people are getting good education. So it's just a question of like, what's the right time to tackle those things? It doesn't go away. It just gets more expensive. So presumably, if the district was to move forward with any one of these options, there'd be tremendous savings that could be reinvested in the facilities and programming. That it's you could decide to return all the savings to the taxpayers, but it seems to me it'd be a good idea to reinvest it in the buildings because they are in such dire need.
But Victoria, I want to clarify that point. This is being called the no bond option because there will be no bond required for new construction. It is not making a statement on whether or not we would need to bond to address other facility needs that we have not addressed in the past. Is that true or false? Do we know the answer to that yet?
I don't think, maybe Peter can speak to that, but I don't think
we haven't asked them to answer that question for us, correct?
No, I mean, we know the cost of bringing each one of those buildings up to code.
Yeah.
And then the question would be, are we just bringing them up to code to put more students in them, or are we gonna add to them, or?
And whether or not that would require a bond, we don't know. We don't know that yet. So calling this the no bond option is because it's not.
Because it can be done without a bond. We can put the students in those buildings.
It doesn't address the deferred maintenance.
But it doesn't address the deferred maintenance.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's a really.
I just want to make sure everybody's really clear on that.
Yeah.
It's a really good point.
I guess I was thinking we were more like at 3 sections per grade outside of Mary Hogan that we would need to be thinking about if we were, assuming we were going to not do anything in Mary Hogan. So I guess I'm needing some clarification around the numbers and the sections per grade, and because aren't we closer to like 350?
What is Mary Hogan now?
Outside of Mary Hogan?
Well,
If you took the 6th grade away, or am I just?
So Mary Hogan is at 385 if you take
6th grade,
out.
Yep.
And the total enrollment is 755. So if somebody smarter than me can do that.
So it's a little under 3, or,
Yeah, so what we were saying, because Mary Hogan is under capacity, we were adding more students to make it a true, because it's kind of a hybrid right now.
Okay.
It's kind of between 3 and 4 sections per grade, so we were adding students to Mary Hogan so that the rest of the district would be 2 sections per grade. But you could,
and I know, and I know capacity, right, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily make sense to, if we're looking at capacity for all the buildings, to not fully use Mary Hogan, but did we, just out of curiosity, look at more even distribution, like?
So
I guess that wouldn't really make sense given the capacity, yeah.
In this kind of scenario, Salisbury is 141, its capacity is 152.
So that's all,
Bridgeport and Salisbury are pretty full up. in this. But Mary Hogan is, you know,
Yep.
they're all pretty full up, but
Yep.
you know, it does fit.
Okay. I have another question. These are K through 5,
Yeah.
and Mary Hogan and Salisbury both have preschools.
No, it's pre-K.
Pre-K. Oh, it's pre-K, because it
Yeah,
says
yeah,
K.
yeah,
Okay.
Sorry, I apologize if I said K. It's
Okay.
pre-K.
The new school option, obviously, that's pie in the sky as far as I'm concerned, relative to, it gives you all of those types of things that you would want in the way of equity and
Right.
new and all of that. But I just can't see, I can't get my head around that. So to
Yeah.
me, I don't think that's, for my purposes, a
Right.
reasonable option going
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
Politically or otherwise, I don't think it is. The only way I see you build a new school in Vermont these days, I don't know where that happens. Look what happened in South Burlington. They want to tear it down and build a new one. However, if you're in, booming parts of Texas or something like that, and cornfields or the prairie suddenly becomes a new place, they build new schools. But that's not here. So I appreciate that as an option, but it's not in my option list.
Yeah, well, that's the kind of feedback we need in terms of moving forward. We don't want to analyze an option that's not as a non-starter.
Just for full transparency, whatever, can you talk, are there some that you looked at but decided not to present to us today, and why? In other words, did you have like 7 and you said, nah, these 3, even though we looked, okay, yeah, thanks.
So we had a 2C, which was, instead of Mary Hogan and Salisbury, it was Mary Hogan and Bridport. And, when we talked it over with the committee, it was sort of like, why would you, Salisbury is one of the best assets in the district in terms of the quality, the condition of the school. It would be silly to not reinvest in it, in a 2-school option. So
The west side, that's
I know,
Right.
and that's the limit, the west side. So that was why we started with a Bridport and a Mary Hogan option to give a west side option too.
Yep.
So that's one we took off, which we
Okay.
put back on, but we took off. But that's why we did include it in this option. Those were the 3 schools to give a west side option. The other one was a 4-school option that we had, what happened was we had and 2 things happened. One is that, basically what happened was that we were like, why would you do a 4-school option if you can fit all the kids in 3 schools? Like, what would be the strategic advantage other than maybe political? And this is really a facilities, like we were looking through completely a facilities lens, so we didn't pursue that.
here. I have to follow to
all right,
that.
sure.
So it does seem like there's enough room in classrooms, right?
Right.
In this model, I guess the broader concern is beyond the classroom opportunity.
Right.
So if there's the other 2 schools have 1 grade per class, 1 section per grade, right, as opposed to the 2, so they wouldn't necessarily need a full-time staff member needing a full-time art room or a full-time behavioral specialist, or name your full-time personnel who may need more space. I'm concerned about the staff room, that if you're meeting that, now where do the staff go? Staff stress is a huge concern. I'm also thinking a student isn't a student, right? So as much as you might have 6 empty student spaces, you could have a real large 5th grade and a real small 2nd grade,
Right.
and so the numbers might not match up. Perhaps with the, the town model that you have now, depending on how, the numbers end up flushing out, being that tight is just a little concerning to me, thinking about those concerns.
Yeah, we did build in the model, we built in extra classrooms, so in case you had a bubble coming through.
Oh, okay.
So in the, not in this option, but in the options that have adding to the schools, they all have like flex space so that if you do have a bubble coming through, you can accommodate them. So this one I don't believe has it, because we're really trying to look at, what would be, how would you right-size the district given the existing facilities that we have?
So this one doesn't have a flex space built into it?
Yeah, I think that's.
So your concern is then valid in this one, right?
Yeah, that might be true. Yeah, it doesn't, take a great point example. It's like all of your schools. I didn't bring the slide. Well, I have it, but it's hidden. The slide that shows the analysis. I mean, these buildings are under-resourced. What school were we in where we met the art room? I mean,
That was actually Salisbury.
they were having art on the stage, and she had there was a complete, like she had to break down because they needed it for drama, and there was some music in the corner, and I mean, what's that? That wasn't Salisbury. Well, I can't remember what school it was. But anyway, we were talking with the teacher who was saying, like, I do the best I can, but it's kind of a nightmare to have to break down, set up. The previous art teacher only did small scale drawings because there was no room to store anything, and this teacher really wants kids to really explore art and do large scale stuff, and as I said in the last presentation, not having these spaces doesn't mean you can't deliver a quality art program or music program, but it is a challenge. You are putting these educators up against a huge challenge to provide the kind of programs that are typical in schools when they don't have space to do it in. And so, to the question earlier about this option, yes, and to your concern, yes, you can get kids, like I said, you could get seats, butts and seats in classrooms, but all those other things that make a 21st century education are going to be, they're not there now, they won't be there unless you add to this building.
Or if we had more flexibility with the additional building, then there could be more space within the buildings utilized.
Yeah, right, if you had, but then you get into, you get away from smaller, I think one of the things, and I can't speak for the district, but the more, basically the staffing issue becomes more challenging, and the ability to provide the resources and the programs at a reasonable cost becomes more challenging the more you keep spreading out and having smaller and smaller schools. So it's trying to find that right balance, I think.
Exactly.
I have another comment about the west side, Bridgewater Shoreham.
Yeah.
Would they have the same enrichment activities? Being so far outside of sort of the center of where things are going on, so I worry about them being isolated, and also the socioeconomic diversity within those two communities and the others. So. Right.
Yeah, I think that this one falls down a little bit when you look at that guiding principle of socioeconomic diversity, because my understanding is that this is not. Now I guess a question would be whether there would be school choice, or is there school choice moving forward. And
That would be part of the board's discussion, looking at whatever model they.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that could be one way that it might mix it up a little bit, but yeah, I mean, we drew these arrows just to make it a little bit simpler to understand like how it could work, but you could also draw circles, like catchment areas around each school that were, you know, a little bit more to create more socioeconomic diversity. Yeah.
The one you took off the table, like you said, the Mary Hogan Bridport,
Yeah.
who was going to be going to the Bridport?
Yeah, on some of these, we don't really know. Like this one or that one, you know, these two school options. The one school option, I know where all the kids are going, but the 2-section per grade, we haven't done that analysis yet. So like if instead of this, it was Bridport, you know, how you would divide up the district. You know, that's the next chapter of the analysis. We'll look at that.
So just as a point of like process, is it safe to say then that as we go through these other two legs of the stool, and we look at questions like one that Mary just asked, or the point that Lorraine just brought up, what we're seeing here is round one of a take at it, but as these other layers get layered on top of it, these iterations, some will fall short, some won't be viable, and some will have to be tweaked to make them viable based upon these considerations, correct? So we're not looking at this as saying, okay, now pick one of these in its totality, and this is what we're now going to work on. Okay, and I think that is super important for everybody to hear.
For example, I would love to see mapped out by geography, by socioeconomics, you know, and length. But I mean, I would like to see it mapped out by several criteria.
We could definitely do that. I'm just going to go back to this.
Yeah.
So this is this technology is GIS, Geographical Information Systems, mapping, and so I think they can do that. I think they could. Sorry, it's so long ago. There we go. Yeah. So I think they can do many. We can ask them at least if they can do it, but I think they could do many layers where they could look at socioeconomic. What were the other things you were mentioning?
Like the bus ride, you know, like, I mean, I know all of those things that we know are concerns for all of us, and, you know, because it might be.
Yeah, I think from an equity standpoint, it would be, you know, they could probably do it by income, you know, household income. They could.
If we were going to in other words, if we were going to maximize socioeconomic diversity.
Right.
What would that look like?
Right.
If we were going to minimize bus rides, what would that look like?
Yeah, the busing, I don't know, it'd be cool if they could do busing. Yeah.
The other component of this is the boundaries were locked in mentally, but we are breaking that by being a separate district.
Yeah, I mean, these are.
And that is the hardest thing for all of us to do, right? And, you know, that becomes whether it's choice, whether it's region, whether it's socioeconomic and diversity and the equity parts. We have to break out of this boundary stuff.
Yeah.
Even to the point, at some point, I would think, wherever we end up, that they aren't called Salisbury School. They aren't called Newport School. They're called something else, okay? But, you know, if we're stuck in each town, understandably how difficult it is to break that. We're never going to get anywhere that we need to get to survive economically.
Yeah, it would have been interesting to have to print this map and take out the town boundaries. You know what I mean? It would be kind of freeing in terms of thinking about it.
It was bounded so back in 1769. cooperated a lot.
Any other questions? from the board? Or thoughts? What do people feel about the 1A, 1D? Should we, from the board's perspective, should we take that off the table?
Put it back up.
Sure.
Moving to accommodate all or build homes.
One, yeah.
In my mind, I would take both of those off.
So that was
Just off the cuff, because I just don't think they're as practical.
We don't think they're practical because the community doesn't have the appetite for them, or because,
Yeah, I just,
I don't agree with you.
the new school, I would think that would be a hard sell, doing away with 7 buildings, so to speak, building a new school. Yes. It would support it, yeah. Mary Hogan doubling in size, or making it much bigger to accommodate all elementary students in the district, does put, you know, a pretty hard pull on way down in South Shore, okay, or way west Bridport, or Ripon. I think there is some of that which is really difficult. I don't know how you would get around that.
Yeah.
What is the work that has to happen on their part between now and when the community forums and discussions and surveys have to happen?
So if you look at the school,
We gotta find a better name.
if we analyze our school,
Yeah. Tripod?
Tripod, that's a better one,
we're going to look at each one of the scenarios through the lens of operations and education. So
Prior to the community meeting?
well, that's part of the discussion. Yes, the idea would be that we flesh it out, but in the interim, survey the community to get some feedback on what's presented here tonight.
Right.
And then build out where we think people are, tending to.
I would just hate to take anything off before we get the opportunity for the community to participate.
I'll be curious to hear from folks, but I would think some of those key questions around busing and opportunity, some of those other things need to get filled out before we ask for opinions, because those are going to be questions. Right. That they're going to, I don't know how I would form an opinion until I bring them in.
Right, so it's sort of the balance between having enough information before making one opinions. You're spending lots of time and resources finishing the plan, setting up.
Yeah, I think for us, if there are non-starters from the board's perspective, then there's a lot of work to analyze each scheme, not just for us, but more for the admin team. And so if there are some that are non-starters, that's good to know, just because we can be a little more efficient.
So can we identify other areas we want to investigate, such as transportation? And sort of try to pull something together by the time we do another meeting so that we can present those options. There must be others besides transportation.
Well, so operations is going to look at staffing models. building operations and maintenance, as well as busing. So each one of the models will be analyzed for those under operations and education is there. So Brittany and Caitlin have begun thinking about exactly what numbers that we pull together.
So you want to do that with every one of the 5 options?
Yeah.
That's the question.
Unless, should we all agree today that there's...
Well, that's why I was forthright and said what I said early on, because I don't think that's very practical, honestly, to, unless we take something off. At some point we have to narrow it down. It's a little interesting how, even at the beginning of this process, some of these scenarios popped out even as just whatever. And that's just because people that had been in the buildings, they knew the placement of where they were in the district, they knew how many general kids there were, not any finite details, but all of that. And, you know, you just can't avoid coming sort of back to that. That's the potential options. Which is difficult, honestly, because it doesn't speak clearly to the people who are really supportive of their small community schools. And that's the part that we're stuck in, is how do we address that type of... Thanks.
I was just going to say, I think 1 million would be a hard sell. However, I would like to see that one put back into the middle grade report. I like the idea of having something on the other side, and I personally would have a hard time supporting and I know that Salisbury's in great shape, but I would have a hard time supporting the proposal that only has 1 section per school. I don't find that palatable, personally.
You options.
Read it? Yeah. So I would report Salisbury. But I would like to see the delivery report option.
So add the delivery report, but you're saying option 3, which was the 3-school option, does not have...
I don't find that one
Right.
something I'm interested in, because I don't like the idea of 1 section schools.
Can we put any kind of approximate price on each of the options too?
Oh, we will.
Okay.
So when we meet next, we will have both the cost of the facilities, you know, what would it cost to add, build a school or add. We'd also have the impact on staffing costs, and it would be not just in year 1, but over the life of a bond, let's say. What's the net savings or net add? And also, you know, you have to buy more buses, you know, so the idea is to capture all those, not, you know, quantitative factors, meaning cost. That it's not just building the $30,000 addition, it's also savings from a staffing standpoint and operations standpoint. And, you know, people can get a sense of what, you know, from a cost standpoint, whether it's a plus or a minus. But I think the other important part is to talk about what are the, you know, from an educational standpoint, from, you know, these categories, equity, diversity, range of learning styles, to also have the educators in the district weigh in on what the impact of these schemes would be on those factors. Because that's the core of the mission.
Could you go back to the slide that lists all the options summarized?
Yep.
Thank you. I think we want to be really strategic about how we can maximize the community forums around this. And I think in order to have a really robust discussion, the emphasis needs to be on the educational standpoint and the educational impacts of any of these scenarios. And it does seem worthy of considering eliminating, perhaps, if there is a consensus around one or two of these being far from ideal, in order to focus our attention on the educational impacts within a limited list. It sounds like there's an appetite for talking about option 1A, perhaps even leaving 1B on the table for now, but I would echo that option 1A seems to miss an opportunity to leverage some of our assets that we currently have. Or do we want to keep all five?
Well, what's the time frame? I'm feeling super overwhelmed. I'm feeling like I don't know what I'm hearing yet and need some time to absorb and think. I mean, what is the time frame for sort of talking about this and moving on to the next step?
Our next meeting is April 8th, 8th. So that was the next, is that a board, a public presentation, or?
No, that's a
Board. So we were, I mean, it's kind of, depending on bandwidth of admin, but that would be the next opportunity to revisit this, and we'd like to come with, the information that we described
In April.
in April.
So we have a board meeting the 23rd. I'm just wondering if there's time for us to do some additional thinking, to have a conversation after we're able to collect our thoughts. This is different than I was anticipating seeing. I was, in my own mind, imagining maybe some different scenarios, and so for me, I'm just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And I feel like I couldn't dismiss or advocate for any of the options at this point, because I'm just feeling like I need to think it through more before making an opinion. But I don't know if we have that time based on your timeline.
I mean, I think it's also possible for the board to discuss this, not necessarily led by David, but in the next meeting. And I think that would be helpful to have it as part of the next board meeting and use that opportunity to talk about everything that's been presented here. It obviously is, no matter what's up there, it's intense, as Mary shared earlier. So letting it sink in and starting to think about what the questions are, what the implications are. It also helps to guide David, and it also guides us too in terms of the information that we need to be thinking about gathering. Looking at the educational piece specifically. One of the things I would mention in terms of education related to this, and something that we talked about a lot in this budget cycle, is the fact that because we are now in every budget coming, we're going to be over the spending threshold. We're going to have to somehow figure in or make an assumption that we're going to have to be part of the educational impact in the future is losing positions and what the impact of that is across all of our schools. So we're going to have to figure out a way to illustrate that in any kind of comparison with a status quo going forward. So that's something that I think we'll also need to talk about and think about. It's not immediately clear because when you start talking about staff reductions, and we shared this in January, we haven't determined these positions are here, here, or here. It's going to affect this program or this school. That we really just took an average. So that's work that is fairly complex, and we'll have to kind of talk through and figure out what that means, especially as we're looking at a comparison. Because I think without that, the comparison is not dealing with the world that we're going to be budgeting within in the next years.
I was thinking about that also in terms of the enrollment projections, not just this year or next year, but the information we have to look forward. But yeah.
So I think that absolutely this needs to be digested, and we have time for it to sit with people. I think that we will move forward on some of the options in terms of rounding out the plans, so that at our next board meeting, maybe we'll have some of that data to help further the discussion. But I guess in the interim, if you've got specific questions, you can email me so that I can make sure that they're included in the analysis going forward.
So I think there's a couple of things that's super important starting like right now, in that what are we communicating at large as soon as everybody walks out these doors? And how is that communication process going to happen? So what is the process in which people are going to be made aware of what this really means, so that another story is not created around it that's not accurate?
And that people have a place to direct the questions.
Absolutely. Like this is like so many questions are going to get created as a result of this, and people are going to start filling in the blanks when there's a blank and they don't have another way of filling it in. And I just want to make sure that we're thinking about how we're going to address that.
I would say that the community engagement and outreach committee is scheduled, thinking about that. Right now the plan is to post the video as well as the slide deck on our website, so people have access to it.
Your comments, are they able to be posted, like, please read this first?
We can do that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, like, start here, read this first,
Yeah.
watch the video, see the deck.
Yeah.
Submit questions to this email address or place that they have them.
Yeah.
This will be the next meeting that we're discussing this at. Okay.
Mary, part of the struggle that we've had with communications has been that our website is very rich, but folks may not be necessarily going to our website for information.
Right.
So as much as I'm seeing Erica, and I'm seeing her look like she is on board with adding the information that we're talking about, I'm also just trying to be proactive of other means that perhaps spread faster than our website. And I know that ACSD has a Facebook page, and Erica's been handy on that. I'm wondering if there are other means of being able to put the message out.
I was an independent.
Contacting the Addison Independent.
Going through the protocol that you have cited. Hey, this is the place to go. Here's what you will find. This is the recommendation as to how you get the background to begin your discussion.
Suzanne?
I was going to say another place, if you wanted to put all the data, you could ask individual towns on their town pages.
Yep.
To put those pieces with the link right to the ACSD page for questions. So then, if the is difficult for people to find this posting.
Yeah.
And it would be, as long as you have that link, questions to be sent to us, then that would be an easier way for people to find the information. The other thing I'll ask is, April 8th, is that set in stone? Because there's a Henry Career Center board meeting that night, and it's going to make it a little difficult for some of us to be places at one time.
Well, we don't.
And just for clarification, Jen, that's a great point on the Facebook piece, is do we duplicate what goes on the website onto Facebook? How do those two worlds interact?
Some of the things are duplicated, either linked back to the website, but not everything that goes up is linked back.
But this would be one that would be duplicated? Okay, great. Perfect.
And Erica also started doing a newsletter that goes out to the whole ACSD mailing.
Right. I think we were due for one.
Right, which
Just
spoke to you.
Yeah, this is coming out, this is the quarterly one, that's the whole district, and we'll do another board one in a few weeks.
So by the end of the week.
Okay, so this could be included in that update. Fantastic.
That would be great.
Great, so there'll be an email directly to people who subscribe to the email list, which if you haven't, feel free to subscribe to the email list, anybody can. A Facebook and a website is basically the strategy that we're thinking at this point. Maybe, real short term. I'm thinking as an independent, it's great, but I don't know that we'll be in before Monday, so if they choose to cover this, it'd be great, but you're talking about the immediate, like walking out the door.
Tomorrow.
Exactly.
Right.
So at this point, does any board member have any other last comments, questions? Before we open it up to any questions? A little while, and I'm open. Any questions?
You mentioned when you were looking at the schools, into the schools, and how you made your considerations, you mentioned that you kind of left Ripton out in spite of the fact that it's a pretty good facility and space because of its remoteness. Could you expand on what you mean by the remoteness?
Yeah, I think when the distance from, so it's a couple, one is a small school, right? So to expand it to the size of the, that is in the guiding principles, which really is driving, as I said, drives us towards a two-section grade school. It would need, such a start with this very small school with a very small wastewater capacity. The remoteness piece is just the distance. If you look at that map from where people live. So, you can see it's, in terms of building schools that are in central locations that serve, we were trying to, it just was too far.
Doesn't remoteness go two directions?
Say that?
Doesn't remoteness go two directions?
Oh, you mean like, so going to another school would be remote for Ripon people?
Right.
Right.
Considering the geography.
Yeah, I mean, none of these are, there's no magic bullet here. Every one of these solutions is a compromise. So, it's about what's best for the whole district. Some communities are going to be impacted. Different communities are going to be impacted in different ways. The thought too, and I don't know if it's true, but that, from Ripton, people may likely be traveling west towards, either to the north or to the south, so it's a more likely movement as opposed to people are unlikely to go to Ripton on their way to work, on their way, to shopping and all that. So it really had to do with this population density and its distance from them.
Just as a comment to the board, it seems like the concerns that Chip brought up of all those socioeconomic issues, the busing issues, the town against town political issues, there's kind of only, if those are the options we have, there's only, to me, one that kind of floats to the top that I would hope you guys look at a little further, which is 2A, which is fix Mary Hogan and put a new one in the middle of the west side. That's a scenario that the towns could rally around a new building. It's something that we could all have ownership in. It's something that fixes the busing issue potentially. You would have a diverse socioeconomic backgrounds because you'd have the Shoreham Bridport poles, potentially Cornwall and Weybridge. And so it seems to me that that one kind of floats somewhere closer to the top, and hopefully you guys are looking at it.
In your professional opinion, which one rose to the top in your mind?
Great question. 2A, I mean, the design, whenever you modify an existing school, there are compromises that, it is what it is, and you have to hook to it and adapt it. And so, the ability in 2A to design a new facility that was really embodied the educational and community values that this community has is exciting. And I thought 2B was a good option too. I know that there's issues with how does the western side of the state get handled, but those two, I would say, rose to the top. I don't know why, I wasn't very excited about one big school. I think there are a lot of advantages. I think one advantage of keeping that option in the mix is it kind of bookends the conversation. So you could really understand, like, wow, if we did one new school or fix Mary Hogan, like, here's the impact. Because one of the things I wanted to say was, apropos to your comment about, like, well, this is what I expected. Well, that's the nature of these studies. It's like, you start with, okay, this is what we think we're doing. And then as you start to explore, you uncover different possibilities. We all thought for sure of option 4, if we didn't show, that was almost where we started, right? Where we started was to, like, keep 4 schools open, close 3. But then when we kind of got into the numbers and looking at capacities, it was like, why would you do this when you could fit everybody in 3 schools? And like I said, we're looking through a facilities lens tonight. We're not looking at, because I don't know much about the politics around here and about, that stuff. So, which is kind of a fun thing, when you're doing one of these studies, it's like you just don't know where it's going to go. You kind of follow the leads of the information, and when we do the next stage of the analysis, it may be that 2A or 2B or enough. Often what happens is there's a couple options bubble to the top even more. It becomes more and more clear as you get more and more information. So that's what we hope. But 2A and 2B I thought were pretty good options. And we, like I said, we had 2C, which was Bridport, and that had intrigued me too. But I didn't see, because my hope for this district is that, maybe I've been not very opaque about it, but like my hope is that for this district is that you just don't park bucks and chairs in like an option 3 and don't do any work in the schools and just leave the status quo, because I just think your kids deserve better. That to me is not a vision. That's like that's kind of a shell game. Vision is a positive reinvesting some of the savings into making, these great learning environments and great experiences for the kids and for staff.
So just to be clear, to, put this out in the open, in each of your scenarios, you would close Cornwall, Weybridge, Ripton, and Shore, correct?
First of all, they're not my scenarios.
The scenarios you went
The
out.
scenarios that I presented, yeah, these were developed in conjunction with the team, the planning team. Yeah.
All right, so those.
Yeah, that's.
And then I did want to say, I believe at the last presentation I was at that you gave, you said your wife held a position at Virgin. So I find the comment that you're not aware of the politics in this area a little bit disingenuous.
Well,
just because
yeah,
I think you're aware probably of the politics of it.
Well, I know it.
So, and then the last question I had is, do your numbers take into account in any way the cost that a municipality, say Middlebury, would bear for upgrades to their wastewater treatment plant, and kind of what that cost would look like? I don't know the status of the wastewater treatment plant in this town, but to say that the town has unlimited wastewater capacity, we know that that's not true.
Yeah. No, we haven't. So right now, the numbers that we're showing, like approximate addition sizes, are all generated from a spreadsheet, just saying like, oh, well, we would have to have these many classrooms and these kinds of spaces, but we haven't done any like actual planning diagrams, and we haven't looked at any of those things. But that would be the next step, is to develop the planning diagrams and make sure these additions fit on the site, and then get pricing on that. We probably wouldn't. We often at this early stage wouldn't go into the checking wastewater capacities of like the city, but it is something we could do.
It seems like it could be an expense that the municipality may bear as a result of that influx of population that I don't know.
Well, the building is, I don't know if we have that slide, but remember that the building is...
Mary Hogan used to have 630 kids in it.
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at.
There were plenty of kids.
Their permanent capacity was 10%.
Right. Yeah.
Stormwater concerns are
But does the town run such? I mean, is it the wastewater treatment across the entire town? It's not like a septic.
Yeah, we don't have the.
You have to look at it.
That's right, but it is like this building. We did a project here. Remember, we added one bathroom and one toilet. We had one toilet. We were taking, and this turns out this building is permitted for 1,000 people, 1,000 students. So a lot of these buildings are already permitted for. I don't know what the Mary Hogan is, but it used to have a lot of people.
First, I wanted to thank you for leading the meeting, so that was a lot easier for people to participate, so I appreciate that. For your site evaluation in Shoreham, I'm curious, you talked about the slope on the west side and north side, but on the east side, there's School Road, which is just a connector road between two parking lots, completely unnecessary. It gets gated off during the day. So there actually is a lot of room to add on to the east, as well as we have municipal water and municipal sewer. So I think that's a really important thing to address. And
it's good to know. Yeah.
So we have questions over here. Yeah. Okay. So I've driven almost every single road in the Shoreham. I have driven every single road because I ran rock a few years ago, and I knocked on a lot of doors, as well as I've driven a lot of brick work. So what your diagram doesn't really show is it's really hard to get from certain places to other places. It takes a long time to drive from even the edge of Shoreham to Shoreham, let alone going to Bridgeport. And the same thing is true in Bridgeport. That whole area, they're all dirt roads, and
some of them you can't even drive on,
Yeah,
right? So there's not a lot of connectivity. So when you look at that map, you don't get that sense. I mean, it took me forever to go door to door. It was hard.
Yeah.
And so when I think about kids, being on buses, that's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
And I don't really see any of those scenarios really addressing what I know to be about transportation and how hard it's going to be. And when kids are socially, 50% of our kids come to school hungry. And, putting them on a bus, hungry, and going further isn't going to, because you're going to be talking hour plus hour and a half bus rides.
well, that's part of the next analysis will be.
But none of the scenarios, what if none of those scenarios end up adequate? What if you look at all those scenarios and you see, oh my God, these poor kids here, I guess they lose out.
Yeah. Well, like I was saying earlier, just before, these studies, they're exploratory in nature, so we don't know, I think if we were to look at all 5 scenarios and find out that, kids are on the buses an hour and a half, in every single one of them, then we might, the board, the committee might say, we need to rethink these options because it's just too long, right? So that's what we're looking at next, and then we'll get that information and report back.
So I really see, based on what I know, unless you have minibuses and you have a ton of, you have so many buses where you're almost taking kids directly to school, right? Which is costs a hell of a lot of money.
Right.
I don't really, see how in those scenarios that you can bus kids like on the far western side or, even in Bridgeport way up to Salisbury, Middlebury. I don't see how you can do it. It's just not physically possible. It's not a straight line.
Yeah.
It's not as a crow flies.
No, it's a good point. I mean, that's part of the next review
So
process.
if in fact that's true, then are we back at ground zero? We have to then come up with more scenarios? So.
Well, I mean, like you said, there could be alternatives to, they could provide more, but, they could say, look, if we have X number of buses, the rides there's some kids who are on the bus, over an hour, but if we add 3 more buses, we can cut it down to X. So it's not strictly, there are other ways to address it, and we just have to get there.
Even a direct route in a car takes a long time.
David, in your experience with schools sort of this is kind of a new thing in Vermont, right?
Yeah.
Is there any indication that the state might help with sort of roads and bridges to help alleviate some of the transportation issue? There's nothing like that you're saying, if you did this with your schooling, we could help rebuild that bridge between the two towns.
We're trying,
I feel like we're unanimous. Apparently you've got big rise, sorry for my naivete, I'm just thinking practical.
Shows we're exploring every option.
Right.
Yeah. No, there's nothing that I'm aware of. What I was going to say was, I'm part of a group trying to get school aid, state aid for school construction reinstated.
Right.
Just just even something similar to the old system, just anything to help communities out. So they're not thinking about bridges and roads. They're not. If we get school construction aid reinstated, that would be our goal.
See, I feel like this would be more efficient if they're saying we want you to utilize your schools and not build new schools, but we're so spread out, we want to be able to get to our schools.
There's no question that the state's, at the state level, they feel like there's too many, schools that are under capacity. And this kind of discussion that we're having, which is happening all over Vermont, is, they should be incentivizing somehow, right?
Exactly.
Because if that's state policy, and that's what the direction they want to see, they should be, and that could be one way, but it's nothing that I've heard of.
All right, maybe that's my next mission.
Yeah.
Okay, I've got a clarification on the so-called no bond option. Because it appears that the assumption is that children could be just moved into those schools from other districts without any expense, which means that the deferred maintenance then either is going to be continue to be deferred or will be absorbed into operational budgets. Is that sort of what your assumption is?
Yeah, you know, probably the no bond moniker is probably not accurate to your point, and the point that was raised earlier. It probably should have been, no additions.
No bill.
Yeah, no bill, no additions, no bill really, not no bond, because the scale of the work, I think with those 3 schools was, I don't know, it's like close to 10 million, and you're not going to do that out of operations. So.
Right.
But
the other scenarios assume schools that are brought up to standard, so it seems unrealistic not to include that deferred maintenance.
Well, you know,
as part of the package.
Yeah, so I think we were trying to bookend the conversation with the 1A being like brand new school, 1 school, and then option 3 being like just move the kids in and tackle the deferred maintenance as you are able, either with a bond or peck away at it. Honestly, pecking away at it hasn't worked, and it's just too big an amount to bite off, I think, through operations. But there would be, a tremendous amount of savings operationally in these scenarios that could be plowed back into facilities. And so maybe it wouldn't require a bond. We just don't know that yet because the modeling hasn't been done.
I just have a quick and easy question, which is, if after you look at the other 2 legs of the stool, or the tripod, is it possible that other options that we didn't talk about tonight may come up? Or are the only options at all, are we going to pick the best one through the 3 lenses? Or if, when we look through the 3 lenses, none of them look so great, is it possible that there may be a different option?
I think that's a good question. I think, if we look at them and they all look like they just aren't going to work, then we would open it up to
or sometimes, like I was saying, these process is exploratory. So sometimes you're looking at these 5 and you go, we didn't think of the 6th option. This could be pretty cool, and so that's always a possibility.
And I think that's really important.
Yeah, we're not going to force. Yeah. Because we've presented this tonight, we're not going to force one of them to work if it's not going to work.
Yeah, the way these so the way these processes work, these studies work, is that you gather, it's kind of like design thinking. You gather a bunch of information, and then you have to ideate, right? You have to come up with some ideas, and sometimes they're called straw men. I don't know if people heard that before, that term. And then you got to test those. It's sort of like where you're going to paint a room, right? And you get the paint charts, and you're going endlessly through all these little chips. Eventually, you got to buy some of the paint and paint a section of the wall and go, I hate it, or I love it, or you know what, I like that color, but if we made it a little darker, it would be better. And that's the point we're at right now. We just painted 5 sections of the wall. We're all looking at it going, yeah, I don't know, that one looks better than that one, but I'm not sure yet. I need to see it with better lighting, or with, somehow, because we need more information. So the analogy falls apart a little bit, but you get the idea.
The master facilities plan came out of this concern, I think, of per pupil spending going up and hitting the EST. And so as part of this next phase, something that I think would be really helpful, that I'm guessing is already planned, is that we take all the information that you're doing and tie it back to what would the impact be on the overall ACSD budget and the equalized pupil spend, because I think it would be helpful for everybody to understand how much runway are we giving ourselves by any of these options. Is it 1 year, 2 years, 3 years before we're back in this?
I just wanted to talk about the class size option. I mean, what I'm hearing is that we're looking at class sizes of 20 to 22. And I had thought from earlier discussions that we were thinking of class sizes more like 15. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about that, but this is what I've been thinking all along, is that we were shooting for class sizes more like 15. And the reason I want to bring it up is that I know there are Mary Hogan parents who are unhappy with class size of 23. I mean, very unhappy with that. It's not something that they would prefer, and I certainly wouldn't want my kids in a class of 23 kids. I think it's too many. And the other thing is, if we want to look at the achievement gap between the lower income kids and the rest of the student population, putting those kids in a class size of 20 or 22 just makes it more difficult for them. I mean, if they're low achievers to begin with, being in a classroom with that many kids is not going to help them out. The class sizes really need to be looked at in terms of what we want to achieve with all of this. And it sounds like one of the major things we want to do is to close that achievement gap. And I think class size is going to be essential to meeting that goal. So I wanted to bring that up because I think anything 20 and up from there is too big.
Yeah, I've talked to, it's interesting, I've talked to a lot of educators, and I always ask that question, it's like, what is the ideal class size? And they don't say 12 or 15, they usually say like 18, 20, and because, so that's, somebody shaking their head, that's what I've heard. I'm not saying, that's when I talk to educators, they don't tell me that they want super small class sizes for a variety of reasons, but that's part of the educational leg of the stool that the district, leadership is going to comment on, what's the impact of these schemes on class size, and or how do you provide, what do they call it, multi-tiered levels of support, right? Yeah, like in other words, there's a lot of effort now providing these different support in the classroom for, to help kids all achieve,
Well, I appreciate that. I get that. I mean, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is it's going to come down to how many classrooms you have. This is what I mean. If we're planning on what kind of buildings we're going to have, and what the buildings are going to be, and how they're going to be arranged and all that. If you're building enough classrooms to accommodate 22 kids per class, that's different than planning on accommodating 15 per class. That's why I'm bringing it up now. It definitely is related to building size and building configuration.
Right, and I think that, so the way this will work is we'll say option 2A or whatever, we'll say, we'll say we've calculated this based on these maximum class sizes, but this is, in year one, how it would be occupied, so this is the average class sizes, let's say, in one of these options, and then we'd expect the educators, who are going to do that part of the analysis will say, this will require more support services if we're going to go with classrooms that big, or more spaces to support that, or we don't recommend class sizes this big. I mean, that's not my area of expertise. Okay. So it will be addressed. Sure.
Another thing to think about with the opportunity gap is I think there's a lot of us who don't plan to send our kids to a bigger school, which I think will, and are thinking about our options for homeschooling and private school and stuff, and that's just going to increase the disparities, I believe.
So I wanted to say two things. I'm going to stand up because I'm short. One is just wanted to bring some light to the busing situation, which I think is really important. I live less than 3 miles from my elementary school on one of these back dirt roads. My kids ride the bus for 40 minutes, and my 5-year-old struggles so much. You can ask Fernanda. We have a plan. Today's his first time in 4 weeks that he's been able to ride the bus, and it is really hard for our family when he is banned from the bus because he can't sit still for 40 minutes, and that's 3 miles. Also, I'm thinking about these founding principles that you are basing your thing on, and this isn't any fault of your own. You've got those principles to work with. I
think they're really lacking in some areas. I don't see any mention of kind of preserving the fabric of our communities and the viability of our communities in there, and I think that should be one of our founding thoughts when we're looking at these schools. Are we factoring in the drop in property value of all of these small towns when young families don't want to move there anymore because their kids will have to be bused so far? Because I think you're going to see that young families aren't going to move to these small communities, and your tax base is going to change, and your families are going to change.
In regard to your numbers and just defining deferred maintenance, which is kind of how the facilities deferred maintenance is how this pretty much all started. I'm wondering why you have, there's 17 million, I think is the total, approximately 17 million. 5.9 million of that is to change the lighting from fluorescent to LED. And I'm wondering why that's considered like a necessary deferred maintenance when I'm all about efficiency, but that's not a necessary thing. So I'm wondering why that is defined in that way. And also why, when you say deferred maintenance, why it's not broken down into the priorities, because your priority one, those are the necessary to bring things to code. That's 1.1 million for all the schools. So, and related to that and related to me talking earlier, I do have concerns about how much the data that you're using is, how solid that it could be, and I think I'd recommend, not recommend, but I would love our board, our representatives, to question the information that's given thoroughly and make sure that this is, strong statistics where in past years things aren't left out, to calculate, like every year it's different, especially with the change of our district, like that ways of calculating things has changed. So I just encourage just questioning, an active questioning of the data, and especially as this whole point of this and all of these scenarios is to save money, essentially, so that the equalized per pupil cost is lower. So it's like, how is the board, how are you going to, like, how is that going to be proven, as well as you can? And it needs to be backed by something solid.
So just a quick comment. I know your comments were general, but they had some specific items. In regards to lighting, so Bruce will back me up on this. So switching to LED lighting has the best ROI, return on investment, of anything you can do in a building in terms of cost savings. It's usually 5 or 6 years. After 5 or 6 years, you've already recouped your investment, and then moving forward, you're saving money. And in many of these old schools, what happens is when we replace the HVAC systems, we're often going with centrally ducted systems because the unit ventilators they're just not energy efficient, it's an outdated technology. In that case, you're taking the ceilings down and you're replacing the lighting. So it's kind of comes as sort of a package, and the lighting piece of it makes a huge amount of sense.
I understand that, but I think it's a little misleading to call that deferred maintenance. That's an upgrade, an efficiency upgrade.
Well, yeah, we could have a beer over that one. Because deferred maintenance, when you have to replace an HVAC system, that's not deferred maintenance. That's system replacement. It's like, a lot of people call, when you take care of your building, maintenance is like painting it, and the things you do, servicing regularly the systems, but when the system gets old and it's beyond its useful life and it's not energy efficient and you have to replace it and it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, that's not deferred maintenance, that's system replacement. And so, but we tend to lump all this.
So I just think it's important to delineate what are these necessary. Also in your report, it says each building of the elementary schools, it says this building is in good condition and solid. You have your stock, sentences. And I think it can be misleading that people think that 17 million is in necessary upgrades for to go towards.
Well, no, the way we describe when we do these facility evaluations, and maybe it's not clear in the report, but it's bringing the building up to a modern standard in terms of energy efficiency, code compliance. And so LED lightings are just a fact of life now. That's like when you bring a building up to modern standards, you put in LED lighting. So it's kind of it's not like and I don't want to go drill down too deep here, but it's not it's like, do you have to replace? Like, these are LEDs, I think, but you're so no, but like, you know, you don't have to replace any of your lighting ever, right? You don't have to do any of this ever, but if you're considering tackling this range of issues, you would do that. So let's go to the next question. Sure.
Okay, so I was just wondering that you're kind of saying we don't really know, we just kind of like paint on the wall, look at it, go back, let's see how we want to change things, right? And kind of move forward in that way. And, you know, having two bookends, one being like the one super school, right? And I think maybe our other bookend should be like the people's choice, you know, and maybe have like a straw vote and say what we want to say, and then just compare it, and just so we can see, and so we feel good about like, they're right, you know, our idea maybe was totally not, you know, in this realm, it's not going to work, it's really financially not there, but at least we know.
Well, I think the bookend will be the status quo, right? I mean, that will be, in terms of, like, what are the costs and what are the, I mean, I think that would be a good thing, you know, if we're doing an analysis of all these schemes, is to also compare it to the status quo of 7 schools and, you know, and
does everybody want their school? Maybe not, right?
Well, that's a great
So
question.
exactly, but for some of these communities, it is everything to them. And so were you not being, you said you weren't really 100% sure of the politics and how everything's laid out around here. Some people want their school and some people don't. So that could clear things up, right? And so instead of taking something that is crucial to a community, you know, that maybe instead of breaking that community, we think about that first and work on that picture of who actually wants to be in this picture. And start with that being the bookend.
That would be the board's
just
decision,
an idea.
You know, but I mean, my sense would be that if you ask most people, they'd want to keep their school, but, you know, so that would be the status quo, modeling that, you know, comparing that to these other options. But yeah, I mean, I heard that Bridgeport voted at one point, like in a non-binding vote to close their school, but I haven't heard of any other towns.
That would be a cool map to see.
What's that?
That would be a cool map
to see how people voted.
Oh, how people feel.
How people feel.
We could consider putting in the survey.
I think
but I also think doing as and Melanie did this, and there are options where they've got looking at status quo, looking at some combination of closure, and looking at closing the high school, and we're kind of looking at it. But I think also it will really help clarify the information that frankly we've been maybe trying that's been difficult for people to see, and then maybe able to see comparison. I mean, I think it would be a really useful exercise for all of us.
Yeah.
All right, maybe one more question.
I have an understanding that the district right now gets about $500,000 a year in the small schools grants. So if we close 4 of the small schools, how does that impact? Because that's an annual payment. That's not like, you know, we lose $500,000 now, but it doesn't make any difference 2 years down the road. That's annual income we have. So what happens if we, if like those 4 schools that were mentioned are closed?
I'll let Brittany take that one.
We do. We get $474,113 every year in perpetuity because we voluntarily unified.
Right.
And I'm waiting for an answer back on the state as to how that might change or what would happen, and we would take that into consideration with any calculations.
Yeah, because that's a substantial amount just in and of itself, but in perpetuity it's even more.
All right. Postcards or index cards. There are cards and pencils there. If there are questions or comments that you would like to leave for the board now. We also, our Grand Challenge, is that open? Yeah. The Grand Challenge email address is still open and accepting your thoughts and questions. We appreciate you coming and participating tonight.
If I could just, I know we've been trying to say it, and I'll just say it again, and then you can say it again in your comments, whatever, which is, and I think everyone got that really this is just the beginning of the conversation, and that there's so many unknowns, and you all raised really good ones that will all be considered as part of the equation. It's not where we're just going to answer our questions. I think it really is an exploration. There's no moving backwards, but having said that, I think it's a really useful exercise to look at the status quo, because maybe we will be surprised. I haven't done it, but at any rate, and just again, for having all of the information that is fully available. And we'll look forward to engaging in constructive ways. It's only the beginning, so we really hope people get that.
Anyone else have any remarks? All right, in that case. Thank you. We're adjourned.